ABC General Hospital spoilers reveal that there are moments in Port Charles when violence does not arrive like a sudden storm, but like a slow poison moving through the cracks of old loyalties, hidden crimes, and private grief. This is one of those moments. What begins as a secret too dangerous to survive becomes something far worse, a chain reaction of fear, revenge, and miscalculation that threatens to drag multiple lives into darkness at once. And at the center of it all stands Cullum, a man who no longer thinks in terms of guilt or innocence, only in terms of loose ends and how quickly they must be erased before they turn into weapons. He has already crossed too many lines to believe redemption is possible. What drives him now is not hope, not survival in any noble sense, but the cold, obsessive need to stay in control of the story before the story destroys him. Pascal was never supposed to become a problem of this size. He was meant to remain one of those background figures who notice too much, worry too much, and then get ignored by men more powerful than him until the truth becomes irrelevant. But Port Charles has a way of turning overlooked people into dangerous witnesses, and that is exactly what has happened here. Pascal has seen too many strange movements, heard too many half-finished explanations, and felt too many pieces of the puzzle sliding into place. The missing medication tied to Britt, the whispers surrounding Windermere, the shifting loyalties around Marco, the quiet panic hidden beneath Cullum's calculated composure, all of it has begun to form a terrifying picture. Pascal may not know every detail, but he knows enough to become a threat, and in Cullum's world, knowing enough is the same as signing a death warrant. That is what makes this situation so explosive. Cullum is not merely trying to protect a secret. He is trying to preserve an entire structure of lies built around violence, manipulation, and misdirection. If one piece falls, the rest may collapse behind it. He understands that Pascal could expose more than one crime at once. He could lead Sidwell toward the truth. He could unravel the false assumptions that have kept Sonny positioned as the convenient target of rage. He could reopen wounds that powerful men desperately need buried. For Cullum, that possibility is intolerable. Every hour Pascal remains alive is another hour in which fear can grow legs, take shape, and come running straight at him. What makes Cullum especially dangerous now is that he has already survived what should have broken him. After taking a bullet and living through it, he is no longer operating with caution. Survival has hardened him rather than humbled him. Men like that do not emerge from bloodshed with gratitude. They emerge with sharpened instincts, increased paranoia, and an even more ruthless willingness to do what they believe is necessary. Cullum is not thinking like a wounded man trying to recover. He is thinking like a cornered strategist who believes the only way forward is through another act of elimination. His mind is adjusting, recalculating, restructuring the battlefield. And in every version of that calculation, Pascal remains the one variable that cannot be allowed to stay. Yet the true disaster is larger than Pascal alone. The darkness around Cullum is beginning to collide with Sidwell's personal tragedy, and that is where the emotional wreckage becomes truly devastating. Sidwell is no stranger to anger or ambition, but grief transforms him into something even more unstable. The death of someone close to him does not simply leave him heartbroken, it reorders his entire emotional reality. Loss strips away restraint, pain sharpens old suspicions, sorrow mutates into purpose. And when a man like Sidwell finds himself staring at a fresh grave while still drowning in unanswered questions, revenge stops being a temptation and becomes a mission. That is the new danger rising over Port Charles, a grieving man with power, resources, and a desperate need to blame someone before the truth has even finished revealing itself. This is where Cullum's secret becomes even more poisonous, because Sidwell's grief does not lead him toward clarity, it leads him toward Sonny. Whether because of manipulated evidence, planted suspicion, old hostilities, or simply the convenience of an enemy who already occupies so much emotional space, Sonny becomes the target of Sidwell's fury. And that fury does not come from cold logic, it comes from heartbreak. That is what makes it so much more destructive. A calculated enemy can be negotiated with, predicted, even managed. A grieving man convinced he has found the cause of his suffering is something else entirely. He will not pause, he will not want nuance. He will not care that someone else may be orchestrating the entire thing from the shadows. He will want pain answered with pain, and he will convince himself that Sonny's destruction is justice. The cruelest part is that Sonny may not immediately understand how fast the threat is building around him. Poor Charles has always forced him to live with suspicion, but this time the danger is different, because it is born from a lie that feels emotionally true to the man carrying it. Sidwell's belief in Sonny's guilt may be false, but the pain feeding that belief is real. That is the perfect recipe for a catastrophe. Sonny becomes the focus of a revenge campaign driven not only by hatred, but by mourning. Every move Sonny makes can be twisted into proof of guilt. Every attempt to defend himself can be read as manipulation. Every ally around him becomes vulnerable. In a city already soaked in secrets, that kind of war does not stay contained. It spills outward, it reaches family, it reaches friends. It infects every corner of the people caught in its path. And that is exactly how Port Charles begins to feel the pressure of a coming disaster. This is no longer just about one murder, one secret, or one planned act of silence. It is about the way hidden crimes generate new crimes, the way one man's effort to bury the truth creates another man's hunger for vengeance, and the way innocent people become collateral damage when powerful figures start moving pieces across the board. Cullum may think he is solving his problem by removing Pascal. Sidwell may think he is honoring his dead by going after Sonny, but both men are operating from emotional distortions that can only produce more blood. One is ruled by fear of exposure. The other is ruled by pain that demands a target. Neither is in search of justice. Both are in search of relief, and relief gained through violence always comes back as ruin. Pascal, meanwhile, becomes one of the most tragic figures in the entire story because he occupies the worst possible position in a city like this. He is frightened enough to know he is in danger, but too morally awake to ignore what he has learned. That tension makes him deeply human. He is not a fearless crusader. He is a man trapped between conscience and survival. He understands that speaking could get him killed, yet silence would make him complicit in horrors that are only growing larger. The more he realizes Marco's fate may connect back to Cullum, the more isolated he becomes. There is no safe direction for him to turn. If he goes to the wrong person, he speeds up his own execution. If he keeps waiting, Cullum may reach him first. If he tries to disappear, he confirms that he knows something worth running from. His knowledge has turned into a prison, and that prison is closing in. Marco's death deepens the emotional stakes even further because it is not just another body in a city used to tragedy. It becomes a symbol of what happens when people are used, discarded, and rewritten by larger forces. Pascal's attachment to Marco gives the story its emotional bruise. He cannot process the loss as an abstract crime. He feels it as betrayal, waste, and horror. Sidwell feels that loss differently, but just as intensely. Each man experiences the death through his own wounds, and those wounds push them in different directions. Pascal moves toward fearful understanding. Sidwell moves toward furious retaliation. Cullum counts on that difference. He needs Sidwell blinded by rage, because rage is easier to steer than truth. If Sidwell attacks Sonny, then Cullum gains time. If Pascal disappears before speaking, then the lie becomes even stronger. It is a monstrous strategy, but also a brilliantly cruel one, because it weaponizes grief itself. What makes the story so compelling is that no one involved is untouched by inner conflict. Cullum may present himself as cold and decisive, but there is still a strain of desperation beneath his actions. He knows that once a man starts killing to protect secrets, there is no finish line. There is only the next threat, the next witness, the next lie that needs support. He is becoming a prisoner of his own methods, forced to keep escalating because he chose violence as his solution too many times already. Sidwell, for all his rage, is also battling the unbearable humiliation of not knowing whether his grief has been manipulated. The possibility that he has been turned into someone else's weapon is the kind of insult that could shatter what remains of his self-control. Sonny, though not responsible for the original sin at the heart of this nightmare, is once again trapped in the curse of being the most believable villain in a room full of actual monsters. And Pascal is left trying to decide whether truth is worth dying for, when the people around him have already proven how cheaply they value human life. As the pressure rises, Port Charles itself begins to feel like a city standing over a minefield. Every relationship becomes unstable. Every alliance begins to crack under suspicion. Those closest to Sonny may sense that something darker than an ordinary mob conflict is taking shape. Those watching Sidwell may start to realize that his grief is curdling into obsession. Those who cross paths with Cullum may notice that he has become too calm, too efficient, too committed to cleaning up any loose thread that threatens him. This is the kind of atmosphere where one wrong assumption can trigger a massacre, where one delayed confession can cost another life, where one desperate act made in private can send shockwaves through the entire community. And perhaps the darkest truth of all is that the coming catastrophe may not begin with the most powerful men, but with the people around them who are most exposed, a trusted associate targeted in silence, a loved one caught in the crossfire. A message delivered through violence rather than words. That is how terror announces itself in Port Charles, not always with grand gestures, but with intimate destruction. Sidwell's mourning may drive him toward a war with Sonny, but the first blows of that war may land somewhere softer, somewhere more personal, somewhere designed to make the pain unforgettable. If that happens, then the city will no longer be dealing with a private vendetta. It will be facing a full collapse of restraint. So, the real horror building underneath this storyline is not just that Cullum wants to erase his secrets, or that Pascal knows too much, or that Sidwell is hunting the wrong man. It is that all of these truths are colliding at the same moment, creating a perfect storm of deception, grief, and vengeance. One man is trying to bury the past, another is trying to avenge the present. A third is about to be punished for a crime shaped by someone else's manipulation. And surrounding them all is Port Charles, trembling under the weight of another disaster that could tear apart families, destroy loyalties, and leave even more blood soaking into the ground before anyone finally understands where the real evil began. In a story like this, death never ends the danger. It only changes who is desperate enough to kill next. The latest wave of aggression inside the WSB is no longer unfolding in shadows alone. It is becoming louder, riskier, and far more personal, and that is exactly why Cullum's latest move feels so explosive. What once looked like a controlled expansion of covert pressure is now starting to resemble an internal seizure of power, with fear being used as both weapon and warning. Cullum is no longer acting like a loyal operative protecting the balance of the organization. He is moving like a man who believes chaos can be shaped into authority, and that belief is turning every secret mission into a threat not only to his enemies, but to the structure of the WSB itself. His new attacks are not random. They are calculated strikes designed to test loyalty, expose weakness, and force key players into desperate choices. Each move sends the same message: the old rules are dying, and anyone who cannot adapt will be erased. That is what makes the situation so dangerous. Cullum is not simply advancing an agenda. He is creating a climate where paranoia becomes policy. Agents begin watching one another more than they watch the enemy. Old alliances start to crack. Orders become harder to trust. In that kind of atmosphere, power shifts quickly, and Cullum knows it. That is where Valentine enters the storm. He cannot afford to remain a spectator while Cullum turns the WSB into a battlefield shaped by intimidation and hidden bloodshed. For Valentine, this is not just another tactical crisis. It is a direct challenge to the balance of influence within the organization. If Cullum succeeds, the WSB will no longer be run by intelligence, restraint, and strategic ambiguity. It will be ruled by fear, retaliation, and personal ambition dressed up as necessity. Valentine understands that better than most, which is why his next move could define the future of the entire power structure. What makes Valentine's position so compelling is the tension inside him. He is a man who understands manipulation because he has lived by it, yet even he can see that Cullum's methods are becoming too reckless to contain. If he waits too long, Cullum may solidify control through violence. If he acts too soon, he risks igniting a war inside the agency before he has enough leverage to win it. That inner conflict gives the story its edge. Valentine is not simply preparing a counterattack, he is choosing what kind of power deserves to survive. Now the WSB stands at a turning point. Cullum is pushing forward with a dangerous new vision built on silence and force, while Valentine may be the only one capable of stopping that vision before it consumes everything. The real battle is no longer just about missions or enemies outside the agency. It is about who will define the soul of the WSB when the dust settles, and how much destruction will come before that answer is clear.